Puppeteer, God, Colleague, Self. Chapter 1, The Puppet System. When referring to the puppet system, this is the combination of the audience, that's you, the puppet, that's me, and the puppeteer, that's her. All three of us elicit liveliness and agency. You, as an audience, grant liveliness to the puppet as you perceive the liveliness of matter. The puppet has to connect to both the puppeteer and the audience to come to life. And here we can see that the puppeteer must communicate to the audience through the puppet, as they themselves often have no direct contact with the audience. The puppet is only really alive if the audience allows their belief to be suspended and indulges in the performance. Chapter 2, Double Vision. Double vision is a concept in which the audience perceives the puppet as object, an inanimate lump of dead matter, and an imagined life. Breathed stillness is a term used to describe the moment when the human audience connects emotionally with the puppet through the appearance of breath generated by the puppeteer. Yet, the puppet is first and foremost an object. There are two ways to understand this. Firstly, any object can be a puppet. This is something achieved in The Gold Rush, a 1925 Charlie Chaplin film in which he turns bread rolls and forks into a dancer. The object dimension of the puppet is accentuated and the audience accepts the puppeteer's invitation to participate in a charming fantasy in which objects are momentarily humanised. Where the puppet is both object and being, Henryk Jakowski calls this state opalescence. The puppet sits in the centre between object and life, yet is pulled and stretched in both directions. When watching puppet performances, the human brain is in a battle with itself. While entertaining the story and life of the puppet, it also subconsciously others the unheimlich nature of the puppet. Object exists only because you humans are deceived into being subject. The lives of objects are overlooked. Us puppets care so little whether you care for us. Chapter 3, Tension. The makeup of my character is 1. The way I look and sound, and 2, the way I move. The specifics of these are a result of tension. It's the puppeteer in dialogue with material. Without tension in the puppet system, there will not be any manipulation available. No transformation, no character, no story, puppetry will not happen. Different types of puppets made of different materials hold different tensions. I'll now take you through 3 different examples of puppets. For each, there are varying levels of tension. First, we have the simple hand puppet. With this family of puppets, you can see that the puppeteer's hand makes direct contact with the material of the puppet. What the hand does, the puppet does. Secondly, the shadow puppet. Tension emerges from different materialities between the puppet and the shadow screen. This form of puppetry involves light as a key element to the illusion, with puppeteers creating silhouettes of shapes in relation to screen and light sources. Space is a really important aspect of this type of performance, as the distance between the light source and the puppet affects the size of the silhouette projected, whereas the distance between the puppet and the front screen affects the clarity of the projection. Thirdly, marionette puppets. The puppeteer connects to me through cotton or string tied at one end to the marionette control and the other to my hands and head. My limbs are linked with wire hooks, which allow fairly free movement of joints. The articulations between the limbs and joints are the material embodiment of tension. The differences in these 3 examples demonstrate that the difference in materiality and mechanisms of the puppet completely change the character of the puppet and the performance itself. The quality of the performance boils down to a conversation between the puppeteer and the chosen material of the puppet. Chapter 4, Resistance. The uncontrolled and uncontrollable nature of matter can be easily understood through the classical story of the adventures of Pinocchio. Before the mouth was even finished, it began to laugh and mock him. "Stop laughing," said Geppetto, annoyed, but it was like talking to a brick wall. The creation of Pinocchio involves a waning of the creator's autonomy, encouraging the idea that the puppet has a life of its own. The story of Pinocchio does well to tell the universal experience of the puppeteer, who struggles to harness complete and total control over the material of the puppet. Chapter 5, God, Colleague, Self. My puppeteer and manipulator is my god, so to speak, who acts through me to connect to you, the audience. But to put it basically, she lifts a string, my arm moves up. But as we now know, due to tension and resistance, this performance is a collaborative effort, and so therefore, we are colleagues. The actor in puppet theatre is both the puppet and puppeteer. Puppet artists also undergo a momentary division of spirit of self, known as dedoublement. This involves both a temporary identification with the imagined life of the puppet and a conscious awareness of the object's artificiality. While the puppeteer creates her play, she has transferred part of herself into the puppet. Strangely enough, one can very often find a resemblance between the puppeteer and her puppet. They've become deeply acquainted with each other during this process. Now, puppetry is a form of open magic, where dramatic irony is used, meaning that the audience is made aware of the mechanics behind the farce, yet choose to indulge in it anyway. You, as the audience, assign life to the puppet through the recognition of human characteristics, even despite the Brechtian nature of the performance. Separation between the puppet and puppeteer, resulting in the death of one without the other, is complicated, if not impossible.